Welcome to the ManXchange podcast hosted by Coach Alfonso Short. Join him each week on Saturday mornings as he engages with his guests and they discuss men leading, boys thriving, and communities winning. The conversation is underway.
Hello, everyone. I hope that you had a great week, that you're having a great weekend as we start off. I'd like to introduce myself as Coach Al Short. I'm the host of ManXchange podcast show. And today I'd like to invite you to become introduced to a very special guest of mine. His name is Dr. James A. Anderson. Hello, Dr. Anderson. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing just fine, Coach Short.
And excellent.
I want to thank you for this opportunity to share my wisdom and my experiences with others who might be on this podcast.
Yes, sir. And that's really what it's all about. And I'm glad that you said it. Generally speaking, the ManXchange podcast, the aim is that we share with each other as men and young boys. Kind of my mantra is that I have a safe community where we can be informed, where we can be healed, where we can be honest, we can be humble, we can be whole, and most of all, we can be transformed. And I know that in talking with you and meeting you in the past maybe year or a little less than a year, that you're an individual that hit all of those marks. So it's really a pleasure to have you on the podcast today. So if you, like I said before, would you please just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, where you're born, where you come from, some maybe educational journey and other things in life.
Yeah. So I was raised in Washington, D.C., your hometown, and I was raised without parents. You know, they left me at the hospital, so they abandoned me. And that had a significant influence on me, as I will talk about later. I was raised basically by Black Catholic nuns and prostitutes in the neighborhood who sort of adopted me as their son. But what that did, my relationship with them mollified the gangs I was running with and the gang influence on me. So they saw something in me that was promise and that allowed me to think of in different ways. You know, what separated me from a lot of the young kids who were gangsters, emerging gangsters, was that I had this voice on the side coming from the nuns and the prostitutes that was telling me positive things. They didn't have those voices. So many of them are in prison and jail now or live very difficult lives. So I went to a predominantly white high school, St. John's High School in Washington, D.C. And it was there that I had my first encounter with white culture in a significant way. But what was important was that I had to compete with these white boys academically and value-wise, etc. And I used to tell people, I said I would go to St. John's during the day, and then when I came home, I would run with the gang at night. So I belonged to two gangs, and at different points in my life, the Decatur Street Boys when I got older, and the Leroy Park gang, which was grooming me to be a pimp at 9 years old. And I'll never forget that. Short. You 9 years old, you know, and you supposed to be having birthday parties and Christmas parties, this and that. I'm out there pimping in the streets.
Well, that's interesting because Dr. Anderson, we know that in most urban cities, the typical story that we hear, particularly of the African-American male, is that we're out and we're in the streets, we're of the streets. That's not necessarily the case, we know. Your story is kind of unique in itself, that you said you were really, you were orphaned at a point because your parents had just left you with someone, and really, even in that, the blessing was that there was someone who did take you in and pretty much cultivated you with the foundation that you could do better. But at the same time, as you have spoken, that it still did not deter you from being kind of a product of the environment of where you were.
Yeah.
The
So
extreme.
I became very interested in basketball when I was young, hooping. And you couldn't hoop in Northwest DC unless you belonged to a gang. You couldn't hoop on the playground. So my belonging to the K Street Boys, for example, was simply because I wanted to be a better basketball player. And that led to my going to Villanova University, originally on a basketball scholarship. But then I lost interest when you know, when I was in college in the 60s, early 70s, um, there were movements crisscrossing in the country: the Black nationalist movement, the Civil Rights movement, the women's movement, the anti-Vietnam War movement. And I was influenced by all of those things. And see, there are not those kinds of movements now to influence young men. Um,
Right. Now, I have a question that you speak on that. Now, even as a young man in the things that you had travailed up to the point of being able to first be good enough in sports and definitely academic, academically strong that you could go to a major university. What did you have kind of as a vision for yourself during this time, kind of your priorities as you were growing and going through these stages of life and still kind of trying to figure it out because you didn't know who your parents were and grateful for who the caretakers who had you? What was kind of vision did you have that you could see yourself
yeah,
as you move forward?
sure. Well, the first vision at Villanova had to do with my emerging as a leader. So I became the first president, the founding president of the Black Student League at Villanova. And we decided that we wanted to not only do things on campus, but do things in the community. So I arranged for us to tutor and mentor gang members in Philly. And Philly, let me tell you, is a true gang city. DC wasn't a true gang city. Philly and Chicago are true gang cities. Okay.
Yes, sir.
And so, but we also aligned with the Black Panthers for the Sun breakfast program in the morning to feed Black kids. We did some other things. So, organizational leadership was my first introduction. And
Okay.
that shaped my vision. Everybody listening to the podcast, I want you to think about this question: how can I make a generational difference in the lives of young men of color? And I confronted myself with that question and decided that for the rest of my life, I was going to make a difference. And uh, if you can't answer that question, then I don't need to work with you. Okay.
Well, that's very important to me, and we've engaged each other, personally and in person many a time, and that's kind of the heart of my message. Is the same thing: is that we become better leaders and we learn what different styles and ways to manage and lead people. So, how would you describe your leadership style, and how has it evolved from the young Dr. Anderson to now being a senior, well seasoned, well educated, exposed to many different things in the world and in life today?
Well, the absence of parents and significant people in my life, family, just a family. I've never experienced a nuclear family as we know it. So I've had holidays with no relatives and nothing to participate in. But that gave me a sense of aligning with other groups and other people. And so it was by doing that that I began to understand the needs of other youth out here like me who went through what I went through. And I will say the question I framed earlier about how can you make a generational difference, generational referring to your generation, whether you're in your 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s or 60s, 70s like me. Uh, and generational also refers to young people you want to work with. So I decided in one of my jobs, I decided to set up a counseling program. My background is in psychology. So I set up a counseling program through a church and a community center for young black males ages 9 to 14. And you may not want to work with that group as a man. You may say, I want to work with older youth. That's fine. But just understand you got to know everything about the group you choose to work with. You got to know about so a lot of times we try to talk to kids and they say, you can't tell me what to do. You can't tell me what I know, this and that. And you got to have a response to that. So you
Yes.
have to talk in language they understand. Uh, you have to develop trust with them and a relationship with them, etc. So, for example, one thing I used to do was I would take a checkerboard with checkers on it, and I would sit and say, "Here are your options in life." So, I would move the checkers around, some of them, and I would remove some from the board, and I would say, "Many of you are in a situation where you have little education, you've been in the justice system, you have children, you have negative source of income, etc." So I said, you only got 2 or 3 checkers as options in life versus someone else who may have 8 checkers or 10 checkers. Okay. So they would understand something simple as that. They would understand that 2 or 3 checkers doesn't give me much option in life.
Well, I
And
think that your example, Dr. Anderson, kind of leads to where I wanted to at least put the point out is that in leadership, it's very imperative that you take the approach that you adapt to the community that you're operating in. And like if you
absolutely.
spoke of knowing your community, knowing the people, understanding their background, because we can speak of how positive we want to see things, and we take for granted that people, in particularly young boys, have been in a positive situation where their whole life their situation could be negative. This is not for empathy. This is just the reality of life.
Yeah. And we really need to understand what we're up against. See, back when I was doing a lot of things I'm talking about, there was no influence of social media and videos, etc. Now that's so prevalent and dominant in these young kids' lives that we have to understand that. And we have to understand the identity that the source of manhood has changed. When we used to fight in gangs when we were
Right.
young, we fight with our fist, right? Now it's
Yes.
guns, knives,
Yes.
chains, all kinds of things. So since that's part of the understanding of these young folks that we want to change.
Yeah. And
You know,
bridging this gap and what you're saying, and exactly what you just stated, is that understanding the role of manhood, not only the role, what the different definitions that we have as men and boys growing to be young men of what a man is, because a lot of times on the street it's about how big your weapon is, how many weapons you got, how
yeah,
many deviant things you're getting into. Sometimes it's that you need a record, to get some type of recognition, and you want a reputation, and it's built that the negative reputation is what make you a big man in your community, when we know
that's
it's
right.
just the opposite. And as you said, in your period of time as a young man, the social media wasn't as broad as it is now. So we can have access to seeing lives and lifestyles from all over the globe, so to say. But at the same time, positive is positive, good is good, bad is bad. And the
Yeah,
thing is that how do we what type of mechanisms do we use to tap into that to get the attention of uh, a population of young people, not only their attention that, hey, look at me, I'm the answer, but to be able to turn that back where it's inward to them, that they realize that change is possible and that I'm here, or there's a group here that's willing to work with you. Because a lot of times we do snapshot appearances as those positive role models. We come in, we speak to a group, you go to the Boys and Girls Club or after school center, you speak to them, and then you're gone and they never see you again.
Yeah.
And that's what's
And
happening because they're absentee, a continual family structure at home. So they say that's just another guy just speaking to us. It doesn't mean anything.
you can have multiple roles when you try to make a difference. So, for example, when I lived in Albany, New York, I was working at the university there. I was the chief fundraiser for Boys and Girls Club, but also I played basketball and ran with the young kids. And because I was such a good hooper, the young men respected me. And so I began to work with them at a different level than being a fundraiser. So you can have multiple roles, but you have to know what you bring and how that can be inserted into the lives of these folks, these young
Yes.
people.
Now, one thing that I don't want to overlook this or oversight it, I want to be known by others. You have an extensive educational background. You know, when you
Yes.
spoke at, you went to Villanova, you just shared that you were in Albany, New York. But I would like for you, I know you didn't do it, get give the background, the layout of
Okay.
the education and what you've done in education to this point in your life from where you came from to
Right.
how you will
Well,
live.
remember I said I was a basketball player at Villanova. And in my junior year, I decided, you think, well, I want to be a big time basketball player for a big
Yeah.
time athletic program. I'm gonna be on TV, all the girls will see me and everything. But I lost interest actually at that point. Once I
Yes.
made the conversion to wanting to do something for my people, I decided to quit the team. And I said, I'm going to go to grad school and make a difference. And I chose an Ivy League grad school, Cornell University, because it was a very political hotbed. And I said, I can learn from people up there, learn from other leaders. And I became the first African American to graduate with a PhD
Hmm.
from Cornell. And that led to other things, other jobs where I was a faculty member in psychology at HBCU. That was my first job in New Orleans, Xavier University. From there, I went on to other schools like Texas A&M, North Carolina State, where I became an administrator. And then ultimately, I became a university president or chancellor, as we call them in North Carolina. And that was where you really had to show leadership. When you at a HBCU and you come in and there have been problems at that HBCU, which was the case where I attended and I worked, uh, you have to have the leadership to make a difference in the short term and the long term. You have to show people up front within a year or two what you can do, how you can make a difference, how you can raise money, all those kinds of things. And uh, but all along, I'd say short that um, Coach Short, that I had mentors and advocates who helped me, who propelled me, who talked to me about this. And I met great people. I was thumbing through some of my papers the other day, and I saw a picture of Ed Bradley from 60 Minutes. And I can remember I sat down and talked to him before he died. I talked to him. I invited him to campus. Muhammad Ali, I have a picture of him when I invited him to Villanova to talk to me and some of the black students. So I have pictures of all of these leaders and other people who weren't leaders, who just were significant advocates in my life and mentors. And that's what I tried to do. But I tried to look around for an organization. First, I wanted to join fraternities, but most of the fraternities I saw weren't doing much of anything for these kids. They talk a good game, but they weren't actually doing anything. The organization, 100 Black Men, is one I was really supportive of because they get down in the trenches and they
Hmm.
make a difference. And they'll have their national conference in New York this year. But I I found that I could do things. These brothers were serious, and we could make a difference. So my education became my badge of honor, and People, young boys would say to me, "How did you go from being a 9-year-old pimp to a university president?" And I would say, "Well, it was a difficult journey, and I had to have people help me." That's one the main thing I wanted them to understand is if you want to change, if you want to make a difference as a young man, as a young leader, you have to rely on people and not rely on your gang. I said because these, are often folks lost like you are, but we can get you to where you want to go. So we have to cultivate your dreams and your values and help you get there.
And I know that you've been very effective with it because I became acquainted with you and met you through my wife, but we were in Fayetteville, North Carolina. At that time, you had served at Fayetteville State University.
Yes.
And many times I met with you and would be out, and students who knew you when you were at the university, they coming and speaking to you, seem to be very inspired still by you and talking to you. You inform me of the different things and programs you set out. But I also know that now that here's now young men in college and the many different places that you were, but you can still look into their life and know, and when they talk to you, because they too have stories of background with something that may have been obstacles. And if they had the opportunity or knew of you and heard your story, at least as much that you had shared at that time, it inspired me hearing about you. I know that
Yeah.
you saw something
Sometimes when I would give
even
talks to
more.
recruit students
Hmm.
to Fayetteville State, and them and their parents would be there, and they would listen to my spiel, and the mothers would come up to me afterwards and say, "Man, I thank you, Dr. Anderson. That's just what my son or daughter needed to hear, uh, because you lived a life. See, when you lived a life that is challenging, they can understand and believe you more. Having somebody that didn't middle class lifestyle, upper class lifestyle, they got a great job now. Come and talk to these kids. They can't relate to them. And
Yeah,
so, you know, it's a conversation you have to have that involves their it's a realistic conversation you have to have, Coach Short, with these folks. And you have to understand their culture, their life. You have to get them to trust you. All of that happens before you ask them to do anything, to make a commitment to you.
very true, very true. This question is: what is something specific or a successful outcome that you're proud of, and how you measure it in your growth in life?
Well, I made reference earlier to a program I started in New Orleans for Black youth, right? And it was a counseling program, therapeutic counseling, basically, for Black males, 9 to 14. And we changed some of them around. They ended up attending Xavier University. I'll cite one particular kid named Reggie. Reggie started out as a young gangster. I met him through the program, the counseling program. I arranged for him to come to Xavier. He went on to accomplish great things. And in fact, I sent him to Cornell to get a PhD. And one of the white boys at Cornell, one of the white professors, who was called the father of cognitive psychology, Uri Neisser was his name. He said that was the best graduate student he had ever had in his life. So that to me was a culmination of my starting to work with Reggie when he was a young kid, taking him out of the neighborhood, making sure that he did positive things, making him believe in himself. That's the main thing, believe in himself. And he went on to do great things.
And that's wonderful. And I know that in where we are in life today, with the times we're living in society, what do you see just from your standpoint, I know you're not in that circle of being on the college campuses, but you still are out doing public speaking to some degree when you have the opportunities. What do you see some of the biggest challenges that we're facing in our community still at this present time, and how can we address these things together?
Yes. Well, I come back to something I said earlier. You have to understand what you're up against. And we're up against a society that doesn't value these youth these youth are influenced by social media, videos, and other things. And we can't compete with them. I mean, I used to think, well, I got to know a lot of rap music in order to talk to these kids. Well, so Biggie Smalls became my big source of
Yes,
information.
sir.
Notorious Big, right? I love Notorious Big. I got some of his albums and everything. But uh, I realized that their conversing amongst one another about Notorious Big was different than how I thought about it.
Right.
So I had to learn how to converse about it with them. So again, knowing what's important in their life early on. How do you talk to a kid? For example, I used to say to young black men, young meaning in their 20s, 30s, that wanted to make a difference, I would say, since you've never been in the judicial system, since you've never been arrested, how do you talk to a kid
Right.
about that? About having a record and what that means for the rest of their life? I said, I've been to juvenile detention center when I was young. And I said, I can talk to these kids about that. Well, see, everyone has to know their place.
Right.
They have to know what they can do, how they can talk to young folks, etc., what their own background is. If you want somebody to be accountant, you don't talk to them about the career in accounting. You talk to them about math, that they have to
Yes.
start being good at math. Start at the source, not at the end point. So the end point is what they do in life. That is
And
the person, who's
and that's
working
very
with.
interesting because in my working with young people and young boys specifically, and in the past few years, I've focused on third, fourth, fifth grade boys, and many of them they've had issues with the justice system. Being so young, they don't look at it as being penalized yet, but it's a kind of you creating a record. So when you get up to a certain age, what I would inform them that if you continue to do this, you're going to reach that age where you are going to be charged with this, where it can really affect the rest of your life. Now, I didn't say this in a negative, the scared straight, and them telling me incidents that they had been dealing with, Dr. Anderson. A lot of times well, tell me about the experience so that I can go into that area with them and hear it and have compassion, and then also bring it up, like I say, to a point where I may be more analytical about you getting in trouble and you don't want to get in trouble because A, B, C, D can happen. They'd be like, I already been through all of that, Mr. Short. So that doesn't bring fear to them because I never wanted to, but I want to bring understanding that they're building their future regardless of the mistakes they've made, and their opportunities are still there, but they do have to make some changes and adjustments in their life. Now I say this, you're the perfect example of being able to go through the trials and tribulations. Uh, thank God there's something that in you, in your spirit, that said, I have the opportunity to do better. Hey, we all, young men of all races, want to be athletic stars if they can. You got that opportunity and you took the experience for what it was worth and looked at it. This is my key to further my education. And
Yeah.
if I spend as much time in the books as I do to basketball practice and all that, then I'll be just as good a athlete of academics. And we're so grateful that you made that decision years ago, and you continued then to plant seeds for the opportunities for others to not only follow but to supersede where you are and what you're doing. We could go on forever, but I don't want to remiss stating that also you have become an author of a book in
Yeah.
this and kind of the semi bio you gave us, you have a book out, which is a memoir. And we will, the name of that book is The Miracle on Cochran Street. And you can purchase that book from Dr. Anderson on his site, which we will have posted here. You can see below where you can connect with Dr. Anderson. But Dr. Anderson, I'd like for you to kind of, again, just a little bit more. Now, just share
Sure.
about how this book came into fruition for you.
Well, my life has been one that was influenced by two major things. First of all, the absence of a mother. And I found that later in life, even in my 40s, 50s, and 60s, that absence was still having an impact on me because I never had birthdays, I never had Christmases, I never had this and that, family reunions, things like that. Uh, and it began to wear on me. And so I went in a search for my parents. And the system, the federal government stymied me. They said, well, back in the 50s, there was one hospital in Washington, D.C. that let black children be born in. That was Freedman's Hospital. No white hospital at that time would allow black children to be born there. And Freedman's lost a lot of records. They lost all my records and all my parents' records. So I haven't been able to get a birth certificate or anything to even know my real name, my parents' names, etc. So it was that search that led me to write the book. I began to reflect back on my life, and I said, I need to share this story with young black men, or black men of all ages, so they can see how you go from being a pimp to a college president. uh, and the travails I had, but also how it influenced my relationship with women. I was always afraid to fall in love because I just didn't understand what love meant. I'd never been loved by a parent, especially a mother, and I didn't know how to do it. So I was kind of afraid of love. Then I went through a period in my 20s and 30s where I was a womanizer because it was, best to just end relationships, use them for whatever I could get out of them, you know, especially feeling comfort and the comfort I never had from a mother. And then later, I grew out of that and became a one woman man. So the theme of the book, you can see running through the book, is how the significant absence of the mother made a difference in my life. Also, um, I want to emphasize in the book, I emphasize the presence of advocates and mentors in my life. Um, because there were many women who stepped up as surrogate mothers for me and gave me protection, gave me emotional support, etc. And as I said, I started a life with the nuns, the black nuns, and the prostitutes who started giving me that caring and protection, and then moved on through life with different surrogate mothers. And so that was important. So I'd say those were the two themes of, of the book. And the book has some exciting things. I didn't include all the dangerous things I did in my life in the book. I was just thinking, I was just thinking back, sorry, I was just thinking the other day about how we when I was in high school, we went on a boat ride, right? And in Southwest Washington. And we went on a boat ride. And we let it be known that only the Decatur Street boys could go on this boat ride. Well, some guy showed up from a rival gang on the boat ride. We put him in one of them big trash cans and threw it overboard. I don't know what happened to the brother. He
Wow.
swam ashore. He did okay. Because I was so bothered by that morally. I said, I can't believe I participated in that. So you have to challenge your own moral ethics at different points in your life and look back in your life and say, well, if I share this with young boys, how will I say it? You know, I was a dangerous guy with a dangerous group of people in this gang. But I was able to rise above that. And the morality of my Catholicism and going to Villanova and other places helped me out a lot. So
That
that's
that's
all it is.
yes,
Yeah.
sir. Well, in ending, and I thank you for sharing your story and sharing from your heart. Can tell. So today, in the end of the story, what would you say to the young boy, Dr. Anderson? Um,
Well, that
nuggets
kid,
we share as some keys to life right now to move forward with to a kid today.
I would say that that young boy, have hope, dream your dreams, but realize that the dreams possibly can come true. But you need to, of all the people that you meet in life, you need to attach to people who can do something for you, people who have positive values, and less attract to these airheads that's
Yes,
wasting
sir.
their time and not going on in life. And
Well,
also to, you know, find your way. It might be difficult, but find your way as I did. And it's important, for us to be there for them.
well, iron sharpens iron, that's for sure. And I take the basic theme of overcoming the struggle is you always mentioned and gave recognition to those who assisted you. So collaboration with issues that we may have in life and that we need resolved, we need to find or seek the people who are in the business of doing that, who have the time and are interested in you individually or collectively, your community, to work on strategies to create a more positive impact in your community and society overall.
Yeah.
Again, I'd like to thank you for being on the show today. I hope that everyone who has participated in watching enjoyed it. Again, we'd like to leave information of contact information for Dr. Anderson. If you look, we're going to post that once again. And in doing
Can I
so,
close? Can I close with one more thing
yes,
about the
sir.
most difficult,
Yes, sir.
Coach Short? One of the most difficult things I've had with these young men is convincing them how to respect women because they were surrounded by guys who didn't respect women.
Yes.
They're in groups that don't value women, young women. They see them as sources of sex or sources of money primarily, and young women themselves, many of them don't have self-respect, so they cater to these young men, and trying to break these boys out of that habit was difficult.
And that's still a cycle that is a struggle today. I find in my communication with young boys and young men and grown men at different ages. And what you just said is really a word that needs to resonate in the spirit of all of us. And we continue to express that when we have opportunities to share and speak and engage with men in different sectors of life. We're all not the same. And again, if you want to contact Dr. Anderson, I hope that you had got information that we
Yeah,
left below.
post my email address. So
Okay,
if anybody
would
wants to
you
contact
can share
me,
that?
please,
Would you
please
share
contact
information?
me. Okay. Don't give out my phone number, but email address.
Okay.
You can give it to Beyonce, but other than that,
Well, the information again is www.meetanderson meetdranderson.com. And his book is on Amazon. And we'd like to thank him and show your love for him by purchasing the book, sharing it with others, and please share the podcast interview that we've just done. And again, I like to close saying that I am Coach Al Short. I hope that you enjoyed the show this week. And I hope that you also continue to share with others that we will broadcast weekly on Saturdays at 11 Central Time, 11 a.m. Central Time.
And I
Dr.
want to thank you again for all that
Okay.
you do and for
Thank you
making
so
a
much.
difference, Coach Short. You're making a
And
difference, brother.
you're making a difference in my life, and we're going to be collaborating much more. You probably gonna get tired of me. I take me as your adopted son already. So I do have your number.
Okay.
All right. Thank you,
All right.
everyone. Have a great
Thanks, man.
weekend.
Take
All
care.
right. Take care.